Ashley, I also plan to share my screen if that's okay.
Yes, that's okay. I'll give you a chance to do that
Okay.
after we do the first introduction.
Hi, Ken. Ken, I don't know if you met Wayne Miller, our executive director. Wayne, Ken Clark is one of our sponsors and supporters and our speaker today.
Hey, Ken, welcome, and thanks for your support, but also for being a participant today. Important topic, so we're eager to hear from you and Bruce, as I mentioned earlier. So thank you for being a part of what we're doing, for sure.
Yeah, you bet.
Important topic.
For sure.
Okay, going to be going live in just a few seconds. All right, everybody, we are recording. We are live on Facebook. Hello and welcome. Thank you for being with us on this Friday afternoon. My name is Ashley Jones. I'm the Managing Director of Community Programs here at the Venture Center, and we are thrilled to be launching this new series, VCHealth, a mental health series. I want to give a huge thank you to our sponsors, presenting sponsors who are the Bridgeway and Chenal Family Therapy, as well as our corporate sponsors, Frost Accounting Firm, Wright Lindsay Jennings, the Little Rock Regional Chamber, and Simmons Bank. They support us in all of our efforts throughout the year, and we couldn't be more proud of their support and thankful and grateful. So thank you to all of you for supporting this program. Some additional programs that are coming up, just wanted to make everyone aware who's not. We have a special PPP updates for small business coming up on February 5th. That's at noon. So you can come with your questions about loans and grants related to PPP. We'll have Edward Haddock with the SBA, a few lenders and CPAs there to answer questions. So be sure to attend that one. We also have a workshop coming up with Stoneward's Dana Berry, who's going to talk to us about managing PR and why that's important. That's coming up on February 9th at noon. And we also have a lunch and learn with our new ICBA FinTech cohort. And so that'll be February 12th at noon as well. So in kicking off this series, we know that being a business owner is hard. Managing people is hard, and attempting some sort of balance and other obligations is hard. And our goal with this series is to make sure we are doing our part to destigmatize the conversations around mental health and provide resources as well as a sense of community that feels empowered and unafraid to share not only the highs, but the lows as well. This is such an important and necessary series that we at the Venture Center and our sponsors feel that it's our duty as an entrepreneurial support organization to spearhead this conversation around entrepreneurship and mental health within our state. Moving forward, we're going to address mental health as it relates to employers, managers, spouses, partners, children, social media, PTSD, burnout, addiction, suicide, and a host of other topics throughout this series every final Friday of the month at noon. So if you are an employee, an employer, manager, business leader, entrepreneur, or know someone who is, this series is for you. We want you to please share and help us get the word out about this program. And for today's topic, it's all about laying the groundwork for mental health and how we're going to move forward with this topic. Understanding the current landscape of mental health, why people don't ask for help, and why treatment is important. Leading this conversation today is Bruce Trimble, Director of Business Development at the Bridgeway, and Ken Clark, CEO and founder of Chenal Family Therapy. Thank you both for being with us today. And with that, I want to go ahead and let you guys take it from here.
All right, thank you very much. And I just want to say it's rewarding to see so many people interested in mental health today. It's like you have said, it's an important topic, and we're very happy to sponsor the Venture Center and provide your members with some new tools. Let me tell you about a wake-up call that I received from the governor of Arkansas in 2015. The call actually came from a fellow mental health advocate who was instrumental in creating the first council to address suicide in Arkansas. At that time, I had worked for the Bridgeway for 7 years, and the hospital was thriving by serving more and more people each year. What I learned from that call was alarming. In April, the governor proclaimed suicide as the leading cause of injury death in Arkansas and an urgent and serious public health and welfare problem in the state. At the time, suicide was the leading cause of death in Arkansas, and over twice as many people died by suicide annually than from homicide. As a native Arkansan, it was disheartening to hear those facts. But those weren't just statistics. Those were real people, mothers, fathers, brothers, sisters, friends, co-workers. Given my role, it was a paradigm shift. I realized I was not doing enough to destigmatize mental health and help others. I eagerly accepted the opportunity to serve on the Council for Suicide Prevention. To learn more to solve the problem, I became trained in community-based programs to assist those with mental illness. Through each of those experiences, there was one common denominator. Stigma is a primary barrier to mental health care. Today, my objective is to increase your mental health literacy and decrease the stigma to create a better social world together. So let's talk about the state of mental health in America. According to Mental Health America, an organization committed to promoting mental health as a critical part of overall wellness, this is where we stand. The mental health of our youth is worsening. Even before COVID-19, the prevalence of mental illness among adults was increasing. Suicidal ideation among adults is increasing. And there is still an unmet need for mental health treatment among youth and adults. Finally, the percentage of adults with a mental illness who are uninsured increased for the first time since the passage of the Affordable Care Act. Mental Health America ranks each state according to the prevalence of mental illness and access to care. And unfortunately, our overall rank is 42. In terms of prevalence and access for adults, our rank is 36, for youth, 31. And as you might expect, substance abuse only compounds the problem. The access to care for mental health and substance abuse is ranked at 42. And the prevalence of mental health issues and substance abuse places Arkansans of all ages at grave risk. What places Arkansas at such risk? We call it the natural state, but the truth is ours is a rural state, which places us at greater risk. According to the Centers for Disease Control, suicide is one of the top 10 leading causes of death in the US. And the suicide rates are higher in rural America than in urban America. There's a combination of factors placing those in rural areas at risk. Feelings of isolation and loneliness, substance abuse, limited access to healthcare services, presence of and access to guns. We are, after all, a hunter state. Cultural differences about mental health prevalence and access, and the stigma surrounding the need to ask for help. Stigma was first addressed as a barrier to treatment by former US Surgeon General David Satcher in 1999. He wrote, "Stigma surrounding the receipt of mental health treatment is among many barriers that discourage people from seeking treatment." 20 years later, these words still ring true. So what can we do? To create a better social world together, we must change our behavior, precisely how we communicate, both listening and talking about mental health. I encourage you to reframe the conversation, or become a mental health assistant, or become a mental health advocate. During my experience, I have heard several words and phrases that only reinforce the stigma. Working with my team, I began to document those phrases and provide alternatives. If you see or hear some terms that you would like to hear reframed, feel free to shoot me an email, because this list we considered a dynamic document and we're always adding to it. Become trained as a mental health assistant. You don't need a degree in psychology to become a mental health assistant. Several community-based programs provide practical training for people like you and I. Become a mental health advocate. Volunteer your time, treasures, or talents to a mental health organization. There are many with a local presence. Ultimately, it will take a multi-pronged strategy for communities to reduce stigma, improve access, and minimize the prevalence of mental illness. These recommendations do not speak to the healthcare professionals who must encourage patients to seek mental health when necessary. When people understand that mental disorders are not the result of moral failings or limited willpower, but are legitimate illnesses that are responsive to specific treatments, much of the discrimination will dissipate. Once again, thank you for your time today. At this time, I'd like to hand it off to my friend and colleague, Ken Clark.
Hey, everybody, can you hear me? Can I get a thumbs up?
Yep.
Okay, perfect. Hey, everybody, I'm Ken Clark. I am an entrepreneur and somebody who's been through the startup journey. I also happen to be a trained psychotherapist, specifically a marriage and family therapist. And this is super close to my heart. It's been part of our own journey. It is, as somebody who works with executives and innovators and C-suite, this is something that goes hugely under discussed, maybe even shamed and hidden away, as much in that realm as any. So I want to share a few thoughts with you today about why this is relevant to the startup space, to the incubator space, to ecosystems and things like that, aside from just being an important human value that we care for folks. Real quickly, just as far as establishing credibility on this, my wife and I started a mental health practice here in Arkansas about a decade ago, 11 years ago. It was in a subleased room, $200 a month. We had no idea how we were going to eat, like a lot of startup folks. And since then, we've grown to be a 3-time Inc. 5000 company. This will be our 4th year coming up. We've scaled to about 8.3 million in revenue last year. We'll be about 11 million this coming year. And at ground zero of that has been my own health or lack of it, the impact on my family, kids who believe that their dad's favorite child is a business named Chenal Family Therapy, and a wife who feels like she's the other woman in my life and the business is who I'm really married to. So a couple of thoughts on why this is really relevant. One, I'm going to nerd out here for a second on the actual neuroscience of this a little bit, and why this is important. In a very overly simplistic, admittedly oversimplistic view of the brain, there's a part of the brain that is responsible, the front part, for the creativity, the innovation, the dreaming, the love, all those things that we do so well, that really make us unique as creatures among all other creatures. And then there's the back part of the brain, the amygdala, that is there and controls fight, flight, freeze, all that kind of stuff, right? And in simple terms, they don't really run at the same time, right? The part of our brain that controls fight, flight, or freeze knocks the creative part of our brain offline when we become afraid, when fear takes over. In other words, we don't write love songs while we're jumping out of the way of an oncoming car, right? The brain is just in survival mode. Critical thinking narrows down. We don't overly contemplate. We just act, right? The eons of behavioral training takes over. That has an impact for entrepreneurship. When we're scared, when we're afraid, when we're isolated and alone, when those things are magnifying in the echo chamber of our own head, we're no longer being creative. We're no longer being innovative. We're no longer being disruptive. We narrow down to survival mode. And that is the opposite of what an entrepreneur, probably by definition, needs to be. It's the opposite of what an ecosystem or an incubator needs to facilitate. That if we really want to creatively find our way out of the paper bag, we have to do something about fear and aloneness and the things that teach us about those things, like trauma and some of these other things that Annalise mentioned. And so this is very salient. This is very relevant to how do we grow and scale companies? How do we change the economic landscape of Arkansas by being a launch pad for these things? Yes, the human factor is at ground zero. That's what I do for a living. But I'm telling you, this has economic implications, startup implications. It is not uncommon to see tragedy befall the startup community, maybe right before the tipping point in somebody's business, because the mental game got so muddied and they got so isolated and alone. So in specific, there's 4 things that I want to encourage you if you're on this call as an entrepreneur, as a mentor, as a staff person at anywhere that works with mental health or business. There's 4 things that we really want you to begin thinking about these things, not as remediative problems, right? Oh, somebody's broken, we need to fix them. They have a headache, let's give them a Tylenol. But how do we facilitate and supercharge innovation through better mental health, right? We get to kill 3 birds with 1 stone here. So number 1, we talked about fear and how isolation and the lack of access to mental health care and resources, but as importantly, the lack of other entrepreneurs saying, I've been there, you're normal, I still get there a lot. Without that, right, we lose the ability to be productive because we're in survival mode. We're curled up in a ball on the floor. And I've been there, right? In the crazy growth of our business, there's been those cash flow crunches. There's been those moments where employees left or whatever, and the fear took over, and I lost productivity for crucial days, weeks, and months, right? So mental health makes a difference there in the ecosystem, but also in the entrepreneur. Team dynamics. If any of our entrepreneurs are doing this right, it's going to go from them to being a team pretty quick, right? And guess what? Teams are filled with people, all of whom have their own mental health journeys, all of which come back together into this sometimes escalating system of fears and posturing and trying to understand and read people and feeling isolated. Team drama, right? Culture, we know this, it's studied in the business realm, impacts outcomes, both for the individual, how it feels to be me as a leader, as an entrepreneur, as well as for my team and what they contribute. And if we don't learn to talk about mental health as part of company culture, not in a remediative fashion, but in a proactive, embracing it, secret ingredient, rocket fuel type fashion, then we're missing the boat. The best teams prioritize and analyze and lean into mental wellness as a team. You want to build good teams that build big things where the people stay healthy and don't implode, then you've got to have mental health as part of team dynamics and cultural discussions. Super important for us to begin integrating. We've got to talk about grit and resilience, right? Any of you that read, Gerber's E-Myth or any of these books, right? We know that the majority of businesses fail not because they had a bad idea, but because they couldn't hold on long enough to reach that tipping point, that critical mass, right? There's a lot of documentation around 10-year numbers for startups. Everybody I talk to, and I don't know if you all have been on Clubhouse yet, this new app, but every big person I talk to on there that's built big businesses, we all laugh about how true the 10-year number is. Like, good grief, if you can get this thing to 10 years, it survives, right? And so we need to be giving our folks the resources to survive, to hold on, to push through the long winters, to march in wet boots. Because any of us that have done this and built something, you know it's a slog more than anything else. One speaker I heard recently said, if you can have 50 good days a year as an entrepreneur, you'll be a millionaire in a matter of 10 years, right? Like 50 good days. It's a brutal journey, right? So we've got to be helping people through the mental health discussion, learn about mental resilience and grit and what they can do to build those things, and how community, how destroying isolation is critical to that. And then we've got to be figuring out how to help entrepreneurs and their families and their kids and their in-laws and whoever, right, learn to deal with the gigantic ripple effect that is throwing the boulder in the pond when we start something new, right? There's all kinds of ripples from being an entrepreneur, from leaving a job, from ditching those great benefits you have, the working the long nights, all that kind of stuff, right? And if we don't provide support for the people who are supporting the entrepreneurs at ground zero, the whole system crumbles. Right? That in me, there's that sense that I can pretty much do anything as long as I've got my wife in my corner. And yet there's plenty of times, we run a therapy business, we buy a lot of couches, where we've had to have fights in our house about why I'm buying new couches for the business, but we're not allowed to have new couches for our house, right? And there's those moments where I'm alone in my own household because the interests of the business, which I think are in the interest of the family, don't feel aligned with what sanity feels like for my wife or my kids. So we've got to be encouraging and empowering couples counseling, counseling for kids, family retreats, support groups of other spouses of entrepreneurs, right? We've got to help folks stick together within the ecosystem and not pretend like everything's okay and put on the brave face, right? If we do that stuff, we I think have an opportunity here in Arkansas with the Venture Center to lead the way in what is not being done anywhere else in the country, as far as I can tell. Mental health for entrepreneurs, and I keep using the word, is remediative. It's remediation. Oh, you're broken, let's fix it. And we need to understand that mental health is the entrepreneurial version of training before the marathon, training before the Ironman, that you have to do these things proactively so that you're ready when the tough times come. Otherwise, you are remediative. Otherwise, you are scrambling, right? That these things inoculate and vaccinate entrepreneurs and their families towards implosions that derail good businesses and destroy lives and lead to dark thoughts. So here's my admonition for today, because I think the Venture Center is going to do a great job at partnering with folks like Bruce and I and our organizations on this. You're going to see a lot more access through folks like Bruce and I. You're going to see people lending their time, creating support groups. But honestly, above all else, and I'm happy to go first, is here's what we need. We need entrepreneurs who have succeeded to say that this was and is a struggle. You need guys like me saying, yeah, I had that fleeting moment for a second where I thought, you know what, maybe I should just drive with the seatbelt off because this is too damn hard and I owe too much money right now. And it's gone for a second, but it was there, right? If you've never done this entrepreneurial game, you don't realize how lonely and desperate those moments can feel. When you think you have the best pitch ever, and you walk into the Shark Tank and they just shred your 2 years of dreams that you've worked on in 30 seconds, right? You don't understand how alone that can feel. And until we, as entrepreneurs that are succeeding or are more successful, I don't know that you can ever get comfortable, but until we share how common this is for us and how important it is that we talk about it, it'll never become normal and safe for the new entrepreneurs, for the people trying this for the first time to do it. And they're going to remain in the shadows. They're going to hide this stuff, and that's where the problems are going to occur and morph and grow into these much bigger things than they need to be. So let me ask you today, if you are somebody listening who is an influencer, who is successful, who has built something within your own company through the Venture Center, or if you don't know where, reach out to me and let's start a conversation from the top down about how normal this is, because only then are we going to have some real conversations about fear versus innovation, or productivity, or team dynamics, or grit, or how this impacts our family. So there's my rant. There's my soapbox. Super excited that the Venture Center is doing this. I appreciate y'all tuning in and lending an ear and being part of this. And with that, I will turn it back over to Ashley and her crew. And thank you all for being part of this.
Absolutely, Ken and Bruce. Thank you both for your insight and kind of laying the groundwork for what we all know to be true, but just might have issue with revealing that to ourselves. Do want to give a chance for our attendees, participants. If you have questions or comments that you'd like to bring up, would love to also know, as we're planning out future programs, if there's any topics that you think you would love to see in the future, if there's enough people and support of that specific topic. We will obviously put it on the books and make sure we've got the speakers in line to do that. So we were open to other topics, but like I said, we've got a ton in the pipeline that we're looking to talk about. So something that has come up, and we all seem to know, potentially why, but why don't people ask for help? Why is this such a stigmatized thing? We all know that people suffer from mental health issues and have issues, especially among entrepreneurship. Why is it such a stigmatized, taboo thing that people don't want to talk about?
I think it's because we have stigmatized mental health. I mean, it's like I said, mental health issues are not a matter of lack of willpower or immorality. It's something that happens to 1 in 4 adults, and for whatever reason, over time, we have just, as Ken said, we've shamed people who've sought treatment. And like, we do need people to champion, people who've been there, done that in terms of treatment and or recovery, to say, you know what, I struggled, but I went and saw a therapist, and I'm bouncing back. Sometimes you see celebrities take that cause, but many times we don't all relate to celebrities. It does take somebody locally.
Yeah, I'll piggyback on everything Bruce said there. I'm in alignment with him. There's probably a couple of aspects that exacerbate it. One, there's this John Wayne notion, this old dumb notion that that tough, gritty entrepreneurs, especially men, it seems like we're stigmatized perhaps even more, but tough, gritty entrepreneurs don't feel pain. And yet it's this stupid notion that doesn't match up with anywhere else in the world, right? You look at sports, you look at the guy who played the rest of the Super Bowl on a broken ankle, and we think like that's the toughest thing in the world. Why? Because it hurt like hell, right? That's what makes it so impressive, is that the suffering was there, right? It wouldn't be impressive without it. And so we've got to reverse the narrative that strength and bravery and courage is playing without pain or fear, right? Like, it's called courage because it's scary, right? It's called bravery because it's scary. If you weren't scared, it wouldn't be impressive. That's the whole point, right? I think it was Churchill who said bravery or courage is not the absence of fear, it's action in the face of fear. So we need to reverse this narrative, and we need to celebrate what it looks like to be scared but act anyway, what it looks like to feel hopeless but rally, that we should not strip out the negative emotion and only celebrate the upside. A second piece that I see is, we've been an entrepreneur, right? I've been an entrepreneur that, asked for payment plans on Cotillion for my kid and stuff because money was that tight. The reality is mental health is not cheap and accessible, right? It is a luxury, even when you're making a great living, $150 a week, $200 a week, if it doesn't cover it, times 1 or 2 people in your family, I mean, you can go buy a lake house for that, right? Mental health, lake house, right? Like, or paying bills or feeding your family. So we've got to find ways to both make mental health accessible, more accessible to folks like us, partnering with ecosystems to bring it into the space. But we also have to democratize the delivery of mental health, kind of what Bruce was talking about, right? Being a mental health assistant. If we were all doing our job as individuals, caring for each other, being vulnerable, a la Brene Brown, that kind of stuff, you put a lot of us out of business as therapists, right? The reality is that we are filling a gap in the community that we as a community haven't learned to pay for, or to provide. So that's in there too, is we've got to figure out how to provide stuff like this. And a lot of that, right? The 2 birds with 1 stone is you get people together in groups where they can normalize each other's journey and you can drive the cost down, right? The real power, and I'm part of Vistage. Barry Goldberg's my local Vistage guy, changed my life, right? I got as much out of him as I ever got out of a therapist, but because he put me in a room and didn't let me hide from other people and made me accountable and made me somebody who cared for people while I was cared for. So that's going to be a big part of the solution, is how do we move it from being something that you sneak off and see a guy like me, and hopefully Ken's got a back door so I can sneak out and nobody in the lobby sees me, to this is in the front fishbowl of the venture center where we're sitting and talking about this stuff and everybody can see it and they go, wow, I want to be part of that. That's how you shift this stuff. So
Let me
rant over. Sorry.
Okay, well, let me just add to something you talked about, the mental health assistance. I just want to clarify that those types of training do not replace Ken. The end result in each of those trainings is that you are aware of the resources in your community so that when you encounter somebody who is suicidal or depressed or anxious, that you can connect them with the right person, whether that's inpatient or outpatient. Speaking of that, I see a question here from Mimi. Can we talk about what insurance pays for? Unfortunately, not all insurance companies are created equal, and they each look at circumstances a little differently. Almost all insurance companies will cover suicidal ideation. There's some specifics to that, but the more acute the person's condition is, the more apt they are to go to a place like the Bridgeway. The less acute, that's where Ken and his agency could step in. And Ken's doing a remarkable job, because you heard me say earlier that we don't have enough access. There's actually a shortage of psychiatrists, not just nationwide, but especially in rural states like Arkansas. And so that makes it very difficult for the psychiatric community, because oftentimes they're doing double duty. So we've got 5 psychiatrists here at the Bridgeway, and each of them is involved with another organization, whether it's outpatient or another hospital too. So having more people with those credentials and Ken's credentials would help this situation.
Yeah, I will add to that, Bruce. The need is huge, and insurance is one of those limiting factors. What we've done at our organization, which has, I just looked at, we have a record week next week. We have 203 intakes, new patients in our company scheduled for next week alone, right? Across the state of Arkansas. So there's so many people reaching out for these services, but there's in our company and some other innovative ones, we're working to increase access by creating different price points. So, there's somebody like Ken who might be very expensive to see because my time is in huge demand. We've got a lot of therapists that take insurance. But then for those people that don't have insurance or their copay is too high, we've begun instituting different price points with newer therapists. So you can actually walk into our practice and see a graduate intern for free. Some of the best graduate interns in the state, people that we know we're going to hire. These are people that are almost done with their master's degree, but you can come see them for $0, for $20, right? We've got people that are newly licensed and have been out in the field, and because insurance doesn't let them be on panels yet, we offer them at a sliding scale or discount. So there's a lot of opportunities out there to get services as organizations like ours begin partnering more and more. I also would encourage anybody that, number one, anybody that if you need a referral and we can't help you, we'll get you one. You can email our company at schedule, the word schedule, at chenaltherapy.com. But one of the things I would encourage you to look at too is because of COVID, because of the pandemic, telemental health has absolutely blown up. And with anything that absolutely blows up and a lot of supply and demand comes to the market, the prices have come down, right? That you can find a therapist available outside your small town or in part of a bigger city that might be available for a discount rate that is better than what you can use your insurance for. So make some calls, ask around, reach out to our practice. We'll get you to the right people, whether it's inside or outside our world. So.
Thanks for that, Ken. We do have several questions starting to come into the chat, so we'll see how many we can get through. This is something that we're going to spend some more time on in the next month, really taking a deep dive into failure. And so this question is about failure. How can we prepare to deal with failure as an entrepreneur?
Yeah, I mean, there's the easy answer, right? Which is fail forward. Within the entrepreneurial space, we're all smart enough to know that, Thomas Edison had to try 10,000 filaments before he found the one that worked, right? That failure is an ingredient. The disservice that we do to the failure discussion is how wrapped around our identity this job is. What it means to me as an entrepreneur to fail, to open an office that doesn't stick and we end up closing down that office or something. Those things feel like personal failures, not just business failures. And we need to merge that discussion. We need to begin talking about how it messes with our head when a P&L won't cooperate, or a new product launch is delayed, or whatever. So I think that's a big part of it. I mean, there's obviously the entrepreneurial truth that failure is a necessary ingredient. But we need to talk about the personal aspect. Bruce, any thoughts?
No.
Next
And
question.
yeah, perfect. And there is more to this, clearly. And we have a whole, session in the future devoted to failure and interviewing other entrepreneurs that have kind of found their way through failure. And so we'll touch more on that in the future. Here's a comment that I just wanted to share. This person says that they have a difficult time asking questions and requesting help. So he's thankful that this conversation is taking place. Another question about failure is, it seems that it was discussed less in the past, and that now it's becoming more of a hot topic. Why is that the case?
Well, I think there's the discussion of mental health anyway, but I think we're moving from, innovation and disruption were not even topics 25 years ago within the entrepreneurial space widespread. Now everybody wants to be a disruptor, right? But we're seeing it's the exact same thing I talked about with mental health. Your big dogs, your women and men that have started these huge companies and have huge success are highlighting their absolutely absurd, glorious failures, right? They're anecdotes from the journey. That's if I'm at a place and there's breakout sessions, and dude that's running the $100 billion company over here, or $100 million company, is talking about his biggest failures, that's the room I'm going in, because that's the guy that I want. I'm like, oh, preach. Like, I need to hear it. I need to hear that I'm normal and all that stuff. So as we've seen leaders begin celebrating their failures, right, then we see it more acceptable to talk about in the space. And then that even fosters the discussion once we've destigmatized it, that failure, rapid iteration is part of how businesses succeed and scale. So I think we've moved from it being like stigmatized topic to secret ingredient that your biggest folks brag about how many times they failed and how disheartening it was. So
That's a great point. I wanted to share this comment with you and get your take on it. This person states that a large part of why they decided to take a leap and become an entrepreneur at this point in their life is because of the stigma and lack of understanding of mental health in the traditional workspace. So can you talk to that a little bit?
Yeah. I mean, entrepreneurship is, man, it's bittersweet, right? Like it's all the freedom and all the fear wrapped up in one. Yeah, I would just say mental health. I would even broaden it just to say differences, right? That we went from an agrarian society 100 years ago to an industrial revolution where everybody needed to fit in boxes, right? Our educational system reflects that. Diagnoses like ADHD are contextual diagnoses. Nobody cared about ADHD when you walked behind dad plowing the field. Like, you kicked a few more rocks, nobody cared, right? These are all contextual diagnoses that exist in this narrow way of functioning that we have demanded. And so things like, being neuroatypical, right? Like these recognitions that I just don't function well in this environment, whether I don't like authority or I don't like overhead fluorescent lights, right? Like, I just am not the best version of me. And so I think especially aided by SaaS and technological revolution and the ability to open all kinds of businesses without huge infrastructure, people are recognizing this is a survival level thing for me. Like, this is a slow death doing a W-2 over here for this other company in the hopes of a gold watch when I don't feel alive. And so a lot of entrepreneurs, anywhere from people who have full-blown active mental health issues to I'm just not mentally healthy, not the best version of me, they're striking out and doing this. And again, as more and more people say, I got out of there not because I had the greatest idea in the world, but I got out of there because I think I was going to die there, right? Then that makes it more okay for more people to experiment with that idea. So that's why I think you're seeing it blow up. That's a fantastic perspective. I know you'd have some comments around that.
This other one is focused on physical health and the benefits as it relates to mental health and how they kind of work in tangent. Can you speak to that?
Sure. I mean, there's a massive amount of studies out there that link it, so I won't try and convince you on it. You can take my word and you can go Google it. There's all kinds of stuff that does that. But I would argue that the biggest benefit that I've seen for most entrepreneurs is that exercise creates a slightly meditative state that overrides the need for other meditative states. Mellow Mushroom just came to our house, by the way. I heard the doorbell ring and I'm about to go have a meditative state with a plate of wings, right? Like smell, sight, sound, repetitive motion, right? Like there's a reason why food is a sensory override for the fact that I'm trying to scale and I can't find the right people and cash flow's tight. I mean, for 30 minutes, my brain is elsewhere, right? And I think that exercise provides a lot more effective, efficient, and ripple effect meditative state than a plate of wings or some extra bourbon. I drink less when I exercise, period, right? At the end of my day, if I go for an hour walk, I may not even be tempted to pour a bourbon that night. There's nothing wrong with bourbon, something wrong with 5 bourbons, but I control that self-medication a lot better with exercise. So in general, I find that entrepreneurs that exercise, have repeated exercise, I don't care if they're throwing weights around or playing pickleball, they're better entrepreneurs because their brains shut off for a little bit. They're better moms and dads because their brains shut off for a little bit. They're better leaders and less reactive bosses because their brains shut off for a bit. We've got to have some downtime in there. You cannot run the engine 24/7.
Here's a great point that was made in the comments, talking about why founders don't ask for help and the stigma around it, being that they don't want to panic the team. And you are this source of leadership and you are guiding the ship, if you will. What does it say when you reach out or put your hand up and say, I'm nervous about this thing, or scared about this next move? What does that say? And what's your thoughts on that one?
I think it says just the opposite of what people are afraid it's going to say, right? Like, I mean, this as parents, right? Your kids know when something's up. They know when you're not normal. You know when your kids are not normal. You watch them all the time. If you're working with a tight, close team as part of a startup, they know when you're off. They know when you're weird, right? It's a relief to them to know that you're human, to hear you talk about it, to actually know what it is, right? You just may be self-doubting. Like, I'm a really sucky public speaker. But they're sitting there watching you stare off in the distance going, are we out of money? Like what's going, like all their fear kicks in. So I think it's a relief when mental health is discussed by the leaders. More importantly, and this is a hard one for me to accept. And I mean, it makes me tear up. My team really cares for me, right? They adore me. I've created these jobs. I lead fearlessly. I fall on my sword all the time. If I'm not giving them a fair chance to take care of me, I'm denying them the dignity of leadership that I hog for myself the rest of the time, right? Like that if I don't give them a chance to step in and be indispensable in my life, right? Then we're not really a team. And so I think that it's a relief, it's an honor. That again, like what is bravery? Like that's the gutsiest boss I've ever had who's willing to talk about that they lead or they follow better when you let them go there with you. So I would just encourage folks, every time I've said I'm struggling, I get care packages in the mail, people rally, they don't run away, they lean in on my team. And they know anyway something's up.
Bruce, did you have anything to add on that one?
Ken mentioned earlier Brene Brown, and I don't know if you're familiar with her, but she's a very well spoken and author, and the way in which we create connections with people is through vulnerability. I'm responsible for just a small segment of our orientation presentation, which takes place once a month. And I'm the second presenter after the CEO. and I'm in a room full of people who I know they're nervous, and it, I enjoy public speaking, and I don't get nervous about it, but go in there. I'm like, hey, I don't know about you guys, but I'm a little bit nervous. I don't know you. You don't know me, and I'll tell you, it's gotten more challenging because everyone in the room is wearing a mask. So unlike this venue where I can see everyone's faces, I can see the laughter and the smiles. When I'm in the room with 30 new hires and I'm wearing a mask and they're wearing a mask, I can't tell if they're smiling, frowning, or just like, gritting their teeth. So I think that's one of the things I learned from 2020 is you have to be more expressive now when you're trying to connect with people, because the mask creates this artificial barrier.
By the way, Brene Brown's Dare to Lead. I've been nerding out on business books since I was 10 years old. I wanted to be Alex P. Keaton so bad. If you guys remember that from Family Ties, right? The nerdy business kid. Brene Brown's Dare to Lead I would rank it in the top 5 business books I've read in my life. Like up there with Napoleon Hill, like take your pick, like Dare to Lead. If you haven't read it, and by the way, she reads her own books on Audible and they're amazing. She's awesome. Check out Dare to Lead.
Nice plug. I love that. Brene Brown's awesome. This is another great question, one that we may end on if no others come in. What's the biggest mistake entrepreneurs make when attempting to address mental health issues for themselves or their team?
For me, it's addressing it when it comes up, as opposed to addressing it from the start as part of how everything is done, right? Like that should be part of every discussion, every meeting between, supervisor, supervisee. Teams should include mental health as part of the discussion before it becomes an urgent discussion.
And Bruce?
We have an internal theme, if you will. It's called Empathy Matters. And you just never know what struggle each person is dealing with. And, we have found that if we can be empathetic towards ourselves as coworkers, we're far more empathetic with our patients. And, going back to the other thing about failure, you got to be compassionate with yourself. This time of year, a lot of people are, setting out on New Year's resolutions, and 30, 60, 90 days from now, some of those people will be successful, some will not, and some may kind of beat themselves up for it, but that's okay. I mean, change is difficult of any kind. So, let's be compassionate towards ourselves and others.
Thank you for that. And I wanted to give the leader of the Venture Centership a chance to make some comments. So Wayne, if you want to take a few moments.
Yeah, first of all, Bruce and Ken, thank you. And thanks to our community, Ashley and the team at the Venture Center for addressing this topic. Like Ken and others, I've had some some journeys that have been difficult. We live in a world where we function as a startup, even at the Venture Center, and there are certainly days that try us all. Everybody works very hard. We deal with a lot of people at a lot of different stages of their lives and so forth. And I'm just so happy that we're having this conversation and that we're able to use this community and this platform for that, because it's frankly long overdue and it's not addressed enough. And, it's interesting as we talk about failure, one of the things we need to talk about too is success. It comes with its own challenges, and the spectrum is broad. And it's just wonderful to listen to Bruce and Ken, who are obviously very professional at this. And I feel some kismet already, frankly, for some of the comments that you've made. And, it is interesting that in the decades that I've been an entrepreneur, how we approach these emotions differently today than we did 20, 30, 40 years ago. And it's probably better than it's ever been, and it will continue to be. And what has not been really brought up today, although to some degree it has, is that the 800-pound gorilla or elephant, whatever you want to call it in the room, which is COVID, which has certainly contributed to all this, and really put our nation at risk as it relates to mental health. So I'm just grateful for the opportunity to have you guys, for obviously your support to the Venture Center. More importantly, what you're sharing with us today in the beginning of, I think, what will be an extraordinary series. And I'm grateful for the audience. And look, maybe we shouldn't record this, right? So it's more comfortable for people. I'm going to throw that out there for my team to consider, because I know some people have had some issues about that. And so we want this to be a safe place for people to come and share their thoughts, to be vulnerable. The Venture Center has prided itself on being that kind of a place for entrepreneurs. The journey that we take is difficult. If it was easy, everybody would do it. There's a much higher likelihood that we fail than we succeed. And this is something that needs to be a part of people's culture, the way they think. And I know, as a leader of just the small team that I have here at the Venture Center, that I really care about the mental health of my team, because if we're not mentally happy or in a good place, or the challenges that we have to deal with on a day basis, we can't address the needs of what our organization is trying to accomplish as well. So, excuse me, those things are important. And the other thing I'd love to add to this at some point too is, I also feel that financial health and physical health and mental health all sort of inextricably work together. And, we do a lot of work in the fintech space and so forth. And we see the struggle that more people in this country have financially than not, and how that affects their mental health and so forth. So there's probably another big conversation to have around some of that. And maybe we can help some of those solutions. But grateful to you guys. Thank you. Thanks everybody for joining today. Ashley, great job on this. Thank you so much. And I look forward to the next session.
Absolutely. Thank you for your thoughts, Wayne. And this, as we mentioned on the front of the hour, this is an ongoing series that will take place once a month, right? And so it's all about building this community. This one was just kind of laying the groundwork and understanding what the series will contain. But I just wanted to read off a little bit of what to expect in the future. So the one that is set for February, which will be February 26th, we're going to explore mental health in the workplace, specifically calling it somewhat of an entrepreneur or employer toolkit. And so with that, we want to discuss the impact of mental health on employees, how to spot it through absenteeism or a lack of focus, and then how do you approach those conversations with those employees, resources, and that sort of thing. So that's where we want to focus in February. So employees, employers, anyone that manages others, finds themselves in those situations, this would be a fantastic program to plug into there in February. We want to also look at the relationships between entrepreneurs and folks that manage others and their spouses and partners. A lot of times those relationships can be stressed. Also, the relationships with children. Ken mentioned earlier, it's a constant balance and a struggle between everything. And so we know that is something that all entrepreneurs face is those relationships. Then focusing a little bit on mindfulness and failure and success, to Wayne's point, that's also an important piece. Social media and what role that plays in mental health. We know it plays a large role. So that's something we want to explore. Obviously, suicide is something that some of us have dealt with through family and friends and entrepreneurs in that space. So definitely want to address that. Also, something else that came up with is, we know as entrepreneurs, a lot of times veterans become entrepreneurs through those leadership skills. They find themselves in an entrepreneurial position. And with that sometimes comes some PTSD. And so we want to explore that topic as well. And several other things, burnout, substance abuse. And so just to give you an overview of some of the topics we look to address, those are it. And if anyone has thoughts or ideas around potential other topics, feel free to reach out to me, Ashley at venturecenter.co. You will remain anonymous. I won't share anything, but we do want to know and get an idea of what other topics you'd like for us to explore as we solidify these topics. So thanks again to our speakers, Ken Clark and Bruce Trimble. And thank you for your support as presenting sponsors with your companies. That's amazing. And also our corporate sponsors, Frost Accounting Firm, Wright Lindsay Jennings, the Little Rock Regional Chamber, and Simmons Bank. As I mentioned again on the top, employees, employers, managers, business leaders, entrepreneurs, or if you know one, this is the program for you. We hope you join us next time. Look forward to other programs that we have. Have a good weekend, everybody. Thank you for joining us.
Outstanding.
Thanks for organizing.
Hey, Ken, you got to send every